Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypno-coaching, and in general the hypnotic arts and sciences. If you want to know more about my work, please check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about how everything old has a way of becoming new again. This is true for things that are good and for things that are bad. Right now, today, I'm kind of fixated on some things that I'm not especially happy about, but let me discuss them and disclose how I respond to them. Now, some of you know I'm a clergyman and I have some credentials as a Bible scholar. And I've always been fascinated by a verse from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, chapter 3, verse 15. That which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out what has gone by. Now, people have looked at this passage and seen in it the notion of a cycle of time. Everything that is happening now has actually happened before. Things that have happened in the past will happen again in the future. The most extreme philosophical version of this is in the philosophy of the eternal return that you find articulated most powerfully in the philosophy of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche's notion of the eternal return is that, if the universe keeps expanding and contracting, it's like the deck of cards. You may have a deck of cards in order by suit and you shuffle them. Now they're randomized. But if you keep shuffling them eternally, eventually every card will be back in its original order. This is the eternal return. Every state of affairs that has existed will exist again in the future. There have been an infinite number of Charles Scott Gileses who have lived exactly the life that I am living now. And when the universe collapses in on itself, assuming it does, there's debate about that in physics, and there's another big bang and everything gets reshuffled, there will be another such combination of matter, most of which will have nothing to do with the state of affairs now, but eventually over infinite time, everything that has existed for me in my lifetime will happen again. That is Nietzsche's notion of eternal return. Now, physicists quickly point out that the notion of an expanding, contracting universe probably isn't correct. The universe appears to be in a state of infinite expansion. But Nietzsche wasn't arguing for the eternal return as a prediction of something that would actually happen. He used it as something called a heuristic device, a tool for thinking about things. And what he wanted people to think about when they contemplated that they may have to live their lives over and over again for eternity was a concept he called amor fati, the love of fate. He believed that if you were living your life happily and well, the notion that you would live it again an infinite number of times should fill you with joy. You should love your fate. But if the notion that you're going to have to do all of this again an infinite number of times filled you with dread, then you weren't living your life effectively and needed to make some changes. So the eternal return hypothesis isn't actually a physical theory. It's just a mind game as a way of asking yourself, how do you feel about the life you're living? However, while this point I think is valid, it's good for us to play that mind game and ask ourselves, are we living effectively and happily, I think that verse from Ecclesiastes, that which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out that which is gone by, is not so much about the eternal return of things, but the notion that human society tends to repeat itself, for better and for ill. Family therapists will often, when they work with a client, construct what's called the genogram, the relationship among the generations. And the reason they do this is that family therapy has found that families tend to repeat themselves. Well, societies tend to repeat themselves too. If you check back on my YouTube channel, you'll see I did a video about the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 90s, which as a hypnotist I lived through. There were a series of psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, social workers who became convinced during that time that there was this worldwide satanic conspiracy that was abusing children, and there were women who were giving birth to babies that were used for ritual sacrifice. There were witch hunts. People were denounced publicly. They lost their jobs. They lost their career. Some people were actually arrested for this non-existent activity, and they ended up going to jail. The McMartin case being one that comes to mind immediately. They were accused. There was no proof. Everyone was just doing emotional reasoning. They felt it must be true, and so they acted on that. And a lot of people got hurt. And the only evidence for the satanic conspiracy was hypnotically recovered memories given by, actually here in Chicago was a hotbed of this at one of the major medical centers. The psychiatrist and psychologist who were at the core of this were doing hypnosis on people in an inpatient psychiatric facility, sometimes enhancing that using hypnotic drugs like Demerol, fentanyl, pentothal, and convincing them, basically brainwashing them, that things had happened in childhood and that they became a multiple personality to keep from remembering, and that childhood trauma was causing all of their problems. It was a big mess. I never believed in the satanic conspiracy theory, and I was roundly criticized for my skepticism. I have since learned that some of the political problems I had in the church I served in Oak Park was because of my stance on this. There were many people in the congregation who did believe in this satanic conspiracy theory, and they thought that I must be either naive, stupid, or dirty because I didn't. But it faded out. We began to learn about false memory. It became perfectly obvious that these women who claimed to have given birth to 9 children, on medical exam, their bodies had never been pregnant. It faded away. But now, the whole darn thing is happening again. On steroids, with the QAnon conspiracy theory of this worldwide network of child molesting satanic liberals who are supposedly trying to take over the world. We see the same phenomena: accusations without proof, emotional reasoning. When you ask these people, well, where's your evidence for this? They say, well, prove that it isn't happening. Logically impossible. You can't prove a negative. So that which was old, the satanic conspiracy of the 80s and 90s, is new again. It's back around us in the QAnon conspiracy. Other things I see. Back in the 19th century, the clergy, and I know about this because I studied it, they were just vicious with each other. I mean, the anger that they had over points of doctrinal difference and polity was just vast, and they treated each other horribly. Recently, I would have believed my own training that was in the past, and that these days we're the clergy on the whole are an educated group of people, and we have basic respect, and we know how to honor differences, to disagree without being disagreeable, to actively listen, to be sure we have understood what the other is saying, to express our opinions as I statements, I think, I believe, I feel, rather than you statements, which are accusatory. You did this, you did that, you are such and such. Well, in more recent times, I've had a chance to go onto social networking and look at what my younger colleagues are up to. And everything old is new again. We're back in the 19th century. Ad hominem reasoning, personal attacks, moderators shutting down discussions rather than moderating a reasoned discussion, political correctness gone to seed. So as I look at these things, the satanic conspiracy returning, the kind of loss of reasoned discourse throughout our society, I'm talking about clergy because I know them, but I see it elsewhere too. There seems to be a return to a not so good way of being in the world that I had wanted to believe was something that was in the past. There is a historical theory, and I'm coming to adopt it, called inversion. That often what we get in history is actually decline masquerading as progress. Technology is clearly progressive. It gets better and more elaborate, but human nature doesn't seem to be. At the time of, Buddha and Jesus, no one had a cell phone. There was no global positioning system. There was no internet. The technology was very different. But human nature, they treated each other very much the same way we see people treating each other right now. The same kind of nobility, the same kinds of corruption, the same kinds of intellectual rigor in some matters, the same kind of lack of intellectual rigor in other matters. So we look at the progress of society, and we look at technology getting better, and we think that society is progressing. I'm not so sure. Progress in technology does not necessarily mean progress in psychology, in human nature, in civility. And I think what we're seeing acted out around us is exactly that point. And everything old is becoming new again. We're getting ready to repeat the mistakes of a past time. So how do we respond? Well, I don't know about you. My response is just to say I'm not going to play. I'm going to live my life mindfully. And I love the teachings of the Buddha on this, because I think that the Buddha is exactly correct. And in the Western Judeo-Christian tradition, we will look to the teachings of St. Francis. I know my values and my ethics. I've thought them through. I'm going to follow them wherever they may lead. Apart from that, I focus on the present. The present is the point of power. In reality, the past does not have the power to affect our future, except the power we give it by allowing it to influence how we act in the present. So these repeating patterns, while observable and something we may have to deal with as a matter of strategy or operationally, fundamentally, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to do what people in the past did. Instead, I'm going to focus on what I think I should do now. And I'm not going to mistake the transient for the permanent. Human nature is not progressive in the way technology is. As a result, I have to assume that the mistakes of the past will also be the mistakes in the future, and on the flip side, the glories of some parts of the past will also be the glories of the future. But an onward, upward progress, I don't think so. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that I know what I believe is virtuous, and I commit to doing that, and I'll follow that where it may lead. So even if everything old is new again, even if the problems of the past return, as well as the glories of the past return, I'm going to stay focused and calm in the present moment, following my path. And I commend that to your reflection. Thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I'd like to invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe. If I can be of help to you, feel free to reach out through email, my website, my Patreon channel. And as always, stay well and stay safe.